Welcome everybody to Moving Markets. Today is Friday, May the 24th. Look at that. I got that spit out in one easy sentence instead of stumbling through it like I did yesterday. Going into a holiday weekend, it's things are going to be kind of quiet. The Dow Jones is up about 113 points right now. It is almost 11 o'clock in Mountain Time. It's puts it about almost 1 o'clock on the East Coast. So the U.S. markets are open for a few more hours. The Dow Jones has been up as high as 165 points today, largely on the backs of Boeing. Boeing made some comments. I don't know if it was a press release or just someone at Boeing, maybe not a formal press type release, but issued some type of statement or spoke to someone and said that they're close to having the 737 MAX 8 and MAX 9 back in the air. It's interesting how investors will so quickly, look the other way over everything that happened with Boeing and the issues that they had a short time ago. Took the stock down, I think, almost 30% from its highs over the two different planes that went down from two different airlines and for similar reasons. There was a report earlier this week, I believe, that suggests that one of those two planes might have gone down because of something it hit. They're talking about something that might have flown through an engine and caused the initial problem. And so there is some, at least some whisperings, maybe some small speculation that it's not a failure of some software or something like that. But Boeing still knows it has a problem. It has to get a fix for that software, even if both planes didn't go down for that same reason. And I don't know if that's the case. It may have been exactly the same reason that both planes went down, but there's at least maybe some hint of some evidence that one of them went down for another reason. Boeing is capitalizing on that. People are buying back into that stock. They are a big company. They are a strong company. They pay a good dividend. They're not a company that's going away. They're going to be a major player in everything they do in the building of aircraft, in air defense, in satellites, all things aerospace. Boeing is going to be a player. They're going to be a player for a long time, and so investors have short memories on things like the airline tragedies that tripped up the Boeing stock. And so with a lot of money coming back in, I don't think volume is going to be high by the time the day is over. We are going into a big holiday weekend. Yesterday saw the big sell-off. If you were listening to Wednesday's presentation, Kevin Hurley and I, we're pretty much on the same page that there'd be more of a sell-off than a buy going into the weekend. I thought it might not come until Friday. He thought it was going to take place on Wednesday. It split the difference. The bigger sell-off came on Thursday. So, the backdrop of today's move to the upside is partially Boeing, and then it's also it's the president made some comments early this morning about the trade war with China. He thinks it'll be over quickly. That might just be nothing more or nothing less than him commenting, thinking that that would be a good thing, and knowing that it might give a little bit of a boost to the market. So he made that comment. He may or may not be right. He may or may not be basing that on anything other than his hope that it's over soon. And then the absence of any other news today, because there's not a lot of other headlines going on today. There's the continuing spats between the House and Senate Democrats and the president and the administration. It's a lot of rhetoric. It's going to go nowhere. It's going to do nothing. One thing Donald Trump did announce that all of the documents surrounding what led to the FBI investigation into the Trump campaign and into Russian collusion, that everything that led up to that has been declassified now, and it's going to be up to Bob Barr, the Attorney General, to determine how much of that stuff he might make public. There's a difference between declassifying it and actually making it public. There's a lot of things that are declassified or have never been classified, but that doesn't mean they're going to be made public. They will be if someone gets their hands on it that wants to leak it, and that happens all too often nowadays. But I don't know if that's really moving the markets. I don't know that the news about declassifying what went into the FISA court order, some other things like that. I really don't believe that's the kind of news that is going to literally drive the markets today. So you've got that as part of the backdrop to what is going on. So today is Friday. I've been leading up all week long to the commentary I wanted to make. I know that's only 5 minutes on what's actually moving the markets, but all this week, based on a town hall that I saw hosted by Charles Payne last week on Thursday about socialism versus capitalism. There were parts of that town hall that I really liked. I think Charles Payne did a phenomenal job. There were parts of it that I really liked. There were some things that absolutely drove me nuts. When I hear people advocating for socialism, it makes me crazy. It makes me lose my mind, because the theme of all of my podcasts this week have been the lies that you have to buy into. You have to willfully, blindly buy into some lies to be able to support the big overarching lie of socialism, and that's the subject of the final podcast in this little series about socialism. To recap really quickly, the Monday we talked about the fact that socialism has never worked anywhere it's ever been tried, and that's a fact. And I spent some time on Monday and Tuesday differentiating between what some people like to point to as socialist governments or socialist economies that are not socialist at all. That there are some social programs that are propped up temporarily and supported in free market capitalist societies. They make possible for a period of time some of these social programs working, but even in a free market capitalist society, I'm talking about Sweden, I'm talking about Denmark, I'm talking about Norway and Finland, I'm talking about places like this. Even in those places where they are very much capitalist societies, they are not socialist economies, they are not socialist governments, they are free market, democratic, capitalist societies that have very high tax rates on the people, and they do not just tax the rich. This is part of the fallacy of socialism. They do not just tax the rich; they tax everybody at very high rates. So it's the free healthcare, the free education, the free public transportation. None of it is free. It comes at a very high price. People like to quote polls and point to polls that say the citizens of these countries, they have a very, very high satisfaction with where things are. That's not an accurate statement. What they are is they're very complacent. They're willing to they've become dumbed down a little bit, and they're willing to trade off less taxes for having the government run some of these things. But some of these countries are in trouble. Some of these countries are having issues and having problems with sustaining these socialist programs. And these social programs, in many cases, are not shining examples at all. Far from it. They're just the opposite. They're examples of systems that are not working very well. They talk about free healthcare in countries like this. What they don't talk about is that their healthcare sucks in comparison to the level of healthcare that we get here in the United States, and that other free market capitalist, non-social program countries provide. So, we talked about that on Monday. We talked on Tuesday about government inefficiency. One of the lies you have to believe and have to buy into to accept socialism is this notion that government can do anything more efficiently than the free market can. The free market is always, without exception, going to do things more efficiently than the government does. And even when those at the head of the government have noble intentions, even when they are operating with a moral compass, you cannot get the bureaucracy out of the way. You cannot keep from bureaucracy eating into too much of the money that's taken from the people and causing it to be run less efficiently. That's just a fact. That's not just my opinion. It is a fact. And you cannot find one single evidence of the government running something more efficiently than the private sector could run it. Wednesday, we talked about the lie. You have to believe the lie that capitalism doesn't work. Or what goes hand in hand with it is that capitalism only benefits the rich and does not benefit the poor. It makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. Again, that's a complete fallacy. It's a complete lie that you have to be willing to buy into. Capitalism lifts everyone. More wealth even if there's a disproportionate percentage of that wealth at the top, more wealth lifts everyone, and you cannot tax people. You cannot tax the wealthiest people to the point where there's never an incentive to create another job. There's never an incentive to run a company. There's never an incentive to take risk. These are things that you have to have these kind of things present. So you've got that going on. And then yesterday I talked about the cost of socialism, and it's, you can argue all you want, and your arguments will never hold water. Your arguments will never, ever be effective, and they will never be based in facts if you try and argue that socialism is affordable. It is simply not affordable. Every country, without exception, that has tried a true socialist economy, socialist government, has inflicted poverty, major poverty, on the masses. A handful of people at the top remain very wealthy and affluent and very much in power, and most of the rest of the country suffers as a result. And that is the segue into today's final segment on capitalism, or on socialism. This is the big lie of socialism. So all of these other things are the little lies that lead up to the big lie. Some people, because they're so politically blinded, some people because they are so unwilling to have a logical conversation, they're unwilling to look at facts, and they'll just buy into the party line, are going to believe this one without having to go through the other lies. But if you believe this big lie, the biggest lie about socialism, at some point in time, you either haven't taken the time to analyze these other four lies and look at them and realize the illogic of them. Because if you look logically at any of these other four lies of socialism, it will lead you to the fact that you could never put any weight at all in the big overarching lie. So the big overarching lie of socialism is the notion that it is for the people, that it is for the good and the welfare of the little people. It is for purposes of lifting those in poverty out of poverty. It is for purposes of eliminating the lower class, growing the middle class, and not having an upper class. It's this notion that all people become equal. It is the biggest lie that has ever been told or ever will be told about socialism. Socialism benefits one group of people. You look historically at any country that has truly practiced socialism. You got to stop buying into this garbage about countries that are not socialist being propped up as examples of socialism. You got to quit doing that. When you look at countries that have actually truthfully practiced socialism, you will recognize very easily, and history supports this and the facts support this, that there is an elite ruling class of wealthy, mostly government individuals that control everything. You put too much power in the hands of the government, and the government will become corrupt if it's not already. I was doing a little bit. This is stuff I've researched before, and this is stuff that I've read about before. I was refreshing my memory a little bit. I read some of the history of Fidel Castro's rise to power. Fidel Castro, and think of the parallels that are going on in our country right now today. Fidel Castro became an iconic, popular figure, mostly with students, mostly with high school and college age students. He became a very popular figure. And this goes back to the 30s. I think he was born in 1925 or 26. So when he was in his 20s, like 47, 48, 49, when he was in his early 20s, he had already become involved in government on a smaller scale. He also was in the military, and he became a revolutionary, and he became very popular, mostly with younger people. And his populism began when he started going farther and farther left, and he would talk to people, and he would spew the lie about how the government in Cuba was being controlled by the United States, that the United States was an imperialist country that was controlling the government of Cuba, and that it was hurting the little people, and that only a system like the Soviet Union, only a system like other socialist countries around the world could help the little people. And it sounds popular. And if you just go to, you don't have to go any farther than Wikipedia, and you can find very quickly and very easily that one of Castro's appeals to the people was when he would talk about free education and free healthcare. That was one of the cornerstones. How similar is that? How paralleled is that? And liberals that are leaning socialist or are leaning towards bigger government and more government programs, and people who claim to want socialism, they're in the exact same spot. If Fidel Castro or if he would have ever at any point in time said, let me tell you how socialism works. It's going to put me in a position of power, and the people that I like are going to be in a position of power. We are going to control all the wealth. We are going to control everything. And you and your children and your grandchildren are going to end up starving. That's the truth. That's what happened. You can, again, don't go to platitudes. Don't spew lines that are ignorant and that are stupid and that you have no facts to back up. Just look at what happened. Most people in Cuba live in mass poverty right now. Most people in Venezuela live in major poverty right now. So you can't point to these societies and say it worked. They got their free healthcare. They got their free education. Oh, and then the government took over the energy industry, and the government took over transportation, and the government took over utilities, and the government took over produce, and the government took over, they took over everything. And the people are left with nothing. And it's the masses that are punished. What happens with socialism is that the upper class shrinks and becomes even more elite, more like a monarchy, and more like a royal family than anything outside of a true monarchy. They control the power with a smaller percentage of people at the very top. And everyone below that top power level moves into the lower class impoverished level. That is the way socialism works. That's what it does. But it sounds so good when you just simply talk about free stuff. When you talk about the government, you'll never need to pay for education again. You can become a doctor. You can become a lawyer. You can become an engineer. We'll take care of all of it. Well, the lie is we'll take care of it for those we select and for those we want, and for those who believe the way we believe, and for those who we are willing to allow into the upper class with us. For those who don't believe the way we believe, and for those who we are not willing to put into the upper class with us, and it's going to be an awfully small percentage, we'll still give you the education, but then you're going to have to work for us. You're going to be a doctor, but you're going to work for peanuts, and you're going to work in squalid conditions. You're going to work in hospitals that don't have modern medicine even practiced in them. And you're going to do it because we're going to put a bullet in your head, or you're going to disappear in the night if you don't. And this happens in Cuba, and this happens in Venezuela, and this happened in the Soviet Union, and this happened in other countries that are socialist countries. Several Central American countries right now where people are fleeing in caravans to try and illegally come into the United States. They are trying to flee quasi-socialist communist governments because it doesn't work for the people. And that's the biggest lie that has ever been told and ever will be told. And it's the biggest lie that people buy about socialism, is that it's for the people. It is anything but. It is the antithesis of that. When people in government, and think about our current politicians, think about our current government, think about Bernie Sanders. What does Bernie Sanders gain from socialism? He makes more than $1 million a year. At least he has. He makes more than $1 million a year. He goes on a town hall on Fox News and he laughs away. Why, if he thinks the rich should be taxed at a higher rate, why isn't he voluntarily giving that money to the IRS? And he laughs it off. He said, I pay what I had to pay. Then don't ask us to pay more, you moron, you freaking idiot. Don't ask us to pay more. If you're not willing to do it, if you're not going to set the example, you know why he'll never set the example? Because he'll be, the benefit he gets from a socialist society is that he'll be one of the politicians. He'll be one of the elites at the top. He has the most to gain financially. For those who end up in the top echelon, for those who end up controlling government, they become wealthy overnight. All of the people close to Maduro in Venezuela right now, started with Chavez and then got passed on to Maduro. All the people close to him are the people clinging to power because they're rich, they're wealthy, at the expense of all the people in Venezuela. In Castro's regime, Castro was considered for a time before he died one of the richest people in the world. How does that happen in a country where there's 50% unemployment and where you've got 80+% of the population that lives in poverty by world standards? You know, our poverty level, our standard for what we consider poverty in the United States is pretty freaking amazing. You can own a house, you can own a car, and you can have access to public schools and qualify for Medicare, Medicaid, and because you're a family of 3 or 4 and you're making less than $40,000, you're considered below the poverty line. Okay, there's a lot of other countries where anyone making over $10,000 a year US would consider themselves well above the poverty line. The countries of Cuba and Venezuela, they've got the majority of their population living below world standards of the poverty line. And then you've got these handful of people up at the top that are mega wealthy and rich and powerful. And anytime someone speaks up against them, those people disappear. That happens in Cuba. It is still happening today. Maybe not on as large a scale as when Castro came into power in the late 50s and early 60s, when he ultimately got up to be called himself the prime minister of the country. He was a dictator, nothing more, nothing less. He was a dictator, a murderer. Call him what he is. When I hear about celebrities, our own previous president, Obama, going and yucking it up with Castro at a baseball game, what a freaking disgrace. What a disgrace to somehow paint a picture that anything he's ever done is okay. I don't like it anymore the way Donald Trump talks about Kim Jong-un. There's a dictator, communist dictator, socialist country. Ask the average person in North Vietnam how that whole program is working out for them. Oh, wait, you better not ask them, because if they answer truthfully, they will disappear that night. They will end up in a concentration camp, a labor camp, or they will just be dead. And usually their family will get killed or taken away with them. That's what socialism brings. I'm going to make a plea to the younger people in this country, to college students, to high school students that are being told by moron idiot professors that socialism is a good thing. They're being told by their classmates that socialism is a good thing. Learn what socialism really is. Your idea of socialism is that you're not going to have to pay back your student loans. That's one tiny sliver of the pie. And someone's got to pay for it. And I mentioned yesterday, Margaret Thatcher famously said, the problem with socialism is you eventually run out of other people's money. What do you do at that point? If you're in the government, you hoard every resource and every dime that's left in that country to yourself, and the people pay the price. It's the people that ultimately pay the price for socialism, the masses. You create a massive lower class, no middle class at all, and a small fractional upper class. And that is the big lie of socialism. And you don't have to just immediately believe what I'm telling you and stop believing that lie. Go through any one of the 4 things that led up to this one and see how easy it is to poke a hole in these lies. One thing that every lie has in common is you can poke a hole in it. That's the very nature of a lie. Go through these 4 other lies that we talked about. You can poke a hole in any one of them incredibly easily. You just have to look at some facts. And that will help you to see why the big lie of socialism, this notion that it's for the people, is just what it is. It's a lie, it's a fallacy, it's a trap. If they can get you believing that at a young age, you're going to wonder in 10 years why it didn't all work out, unless you're one of those, 1 in 100 that got into that elite upper class for some reason. And it pretty much has to be a family connection. That's it, folks. That's if I pray for this country. I pray for the younger generation in this country that they will stop believing the lies. Take a close look at who's perpetrating these lies. It's the politicians that know they will stay in power. If you vote for socialism, you're guaranteeing their catapult into massive wealth. And you're guaranteeing your drop into major poverty. That's the facts. Quit listening to the lies. For the last time going into the Memorial Day weekend, if you notice, for the first time, I didn't wear a hat today that said something about the military, but I wore my USA flag cufflinks, and I don't know if you can see it. I wore my patriotic watch. You can see that a little bit in the camera. So shout out to all of the men and women that wear the uniform of this country, that have served this country, whether it be in the armed forces, the Army, the Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, and hats off and thank you from myself, from my family, from Safe Option Strategies. Thank you also to the men and women in blue that do so much to protect our communities and uphold the laws. And then also a shout out to the firemen, because you got a tough job as well, and you do it, I think, for little pay compared to the risks you take to try and help us and save us. So everyone have a happy Memorial Day weekend. This wraps up our series on socialism. I hope you've learned something. If you haven't learned anything else, you've learned how passionate I am about a free market capitalist society, and that we can get past this notion that we should ever go to a socialist country. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.